Hi, and welcome to our third day of the CRC's Water Sensitive Cities Conference. Glad you've stuck with us so far. We've got another exciting day of presentations, and of course, don't forget the training tomorrow. I've been busy plugging the training over the last couple of days, but you'll be either pleased to know or disappointed that it's sold out. So congratulations to those who found a spot in the training courses. We hope you look forward to it, and we hope you enjoy it and get a lot out of it. Today's a slightly different format in the sense that we're now fully online, so there's everybody's watching us from around the country, from their personal devices and the like. And this is the kick-off of our national webinar series. So for those who joined us on the first day, you'll know that we had to shift around our national day, which is what this is. Shift it around from being a day of back-to-back online sessions and in-person sessions around the countryside, much like yesterday, to now being a webinar series. It was an adaptation to COVID here in Melbourne, where I'm standing at the moment, just to make sure that we had everyone's health and safety as paramount and foremost. So today we kick off the first of our webinars. We have a session with a number of high-profile people from around the countryside, some of whom will join me here in the studio in Melbourne. Others will be dialling in from around the countryside. They'll be asking the question about how we change the politics, how we change the authorising environment to really get water-sensitive cities up and going. It builds on the discussions over the last few days where we've talked about the principles, we've talked about the ideas, we've talked about the technologies, we've talked about the tools, we've talked about the case studies, we've talked about our willingness, we've talked about the business case. We're pretty much ready to go. What we need now is to take that next step. And getting the political leaders behind us is one of the key important steps. So that's the question we'll be exploring today. I mentioned this is webinar number 1. You might have seen in the reel before we started today, we have a number of other webinars coming up. Essentially what we've done is taken the presentations and the keynotes that would have otherwise happened today, and we've turned them into a series of 1-hour webinars that will roll out over the next couple of months. So you can imagine we've been fairly busy here in Melbourne and around the countryside delivering the conference. So the first webinars we'll give ourselves a week's break to get things organised and give people time to register and put it in their calendars. And then we'll be back from the week of the 29th and run forward from there. We'll skip over the school holidays, obviously, and we'll be able to finish up our webinars in early May. That gives us plenty of time to finish up the CRC by the end of June. I won't go through the detailed program now, but suffice to say we do have our 2 keynotes ready to go. That's Kuteng Chai from Singapore and Lucinda Hartley from Melbourne. We'll also have dedicated webinars to each one of our major research projects. For those who are new to the CRC, they're called Integrated Research Projects. We call them IRPs. We have 5 of them. So each one, there'll be 5 webinars. We'll run through them, along with some industry case studies and applications to show how they work. So it's 5 webinars plus 2 keynotes. We also have a major research program on our tools and products. We call it TAPS, T-A-P-S. We'll have a dedicated webinar to that as well, running you through the different tools, how they fit together, and also case studies of those. To keep it interesting, to keep us on our toes, we've got another special topic webinars. We've got one around urban heat because it's just such an interesting topic. We've got one around benchmarking, just because the benchmarking is going ballistic around the world. I think as Bryony said yesterday, over 50 cities, and we're getting increasing interest in a range of different continents, from South America, to Europe, to India, to China, to Indonesia, the list goes on. So we've got a lot of stories to tell about benchmarking. On that note, we probably will have a webinar as well around our international projects. Those who followed the CRC will know we've had a big presence in China, but a growing presence in places like Indonesia and India and other places as well. So we have stories to tell and case studies to share. And where we want to end up is the final webinar on transformative cities. Bryony Rogers, our Chief Research Officer, and Tony Wong, our ex-CEO, will lead this webinar, which is a think tank piece that we've provided on where we might go to next, what the next research agenda looks like. So that's what's coming up. If you want to find out more, make sure you watch our social media feeds, our Twitter and the like, and also stay tuned to our WaterSense newsletter if you're already subscribed. Of course, the other way that you can stay in contact with us is our new webinar, our website, I should say. You'll see that on the screen behind me. We're calling this our knowledge platform. We've switched this around. We're now at the end of the CRC, and so we have to think about what it will look like after we're finished. So the website that we've been running for the last 9 years, it's done its job, but it's really been a website that's for a research program. Now we've developed this knowledge platform that's a website for users. We've done a lot of user testing, asking people what they want from a website. And the information came back loud and clear. We want quick, easy, simple way to find the tools, the research, and the products and the outputs that the CRC has produced. And we recognise that the website that we had up until now, it's got a lot in it. So what we've done is stripped it right back to help you find the things that you want in a quick and easy way. I've got it up on the screen here. It's also up on the screen behind me. What I'm going to do is run you through a few of the key features. Some of the people who've been attending the webinars, also the conference in person, will have seen some of these features before. But if you're joining us online, this might be the first time you've seen it. So you can see open in front of me here, I have the home page. This is the new home page. You just go to the same CRC website address. That hasn't changed, but obviously a new look and feel. What we have here is a wheel, and it represents the different parts of the Water Sensitive Cities Index, which is how we define what a water sensitive city actually is. You can see off to the side we also have little links over here. You can watch videos that explain what water sensitive cities are and are great communication tools. But let's just focus on this wheel for the moment. The wheel is interactive, so let's have a little bit of a look here. Let's click on urban livability and have a bit of a look. You can see there that it spins round. You can also see that a menu comes up of what we've got, a range of different themes here. This is different research themes, areas where we've done our work, and you can investigate and dive a bit deeper. Let's have a look at urban heat. So click on that. Each one of those links takes you to a theme page like this that explores the theme of urban heat. I've got a short introduction to it, but really the guts of it is here with these tabs. You can see 4 tabs along the top. The first one, the first tab that's highlighted, talks about research findings and reports. Here you can find a list, a summary, and if I scroll down the page, you'll find more and more information about what we've produced. This is where you'd find things like journal articles, technical reports and the like. And by clicking on the hyperlinks, it will take you straight to those resources. Obviously with journal articles, they're with the journals themselves, so you do have to have access to the journals to be able to read them. If we click on research application, you can see there's a number of tiles below. Projects that we've done, we're applying that research. If you click on any of one of those, it will take you through the project. You can read more about it and download the resources. So a great application there. The next tab along is the tools and the guidelines. Again, if you've been following the CRC, you know that we love tools and produce many of them. What we've done here is pull together the different tools that apply, in this case, to urban heat. So if I was going to click through, I can show you this in a minute. If I click on Scenario Tool, it will take me through to the tools part of our website. This explains all about the Scenario Tool, gives you all the instructions that you need, and talks about the different modules of the tool. And just another quick plug, the training will cover this tomorrow. I won't click it now because it's a bit hard to get back to, but if I click on the links here, it will actually take me straight through to the tool. So what that's really showing is if you're a consultant or an engineer or a scientist that wants to use one of these things, really it's only taking me 2 or 3 clicks to get from the home page right through to the tool that you can explore. Go back to the home page just to show you what I mean in a bit more detail. We've been here before, you've seen what this looks like. You'll notice down the bottom of the page, I'll just scroll up so you're not hidden behind that logo there. Down the bottom of the home page, we've got a link here for resources, for tools, and for case studies. So if I click on any one of these, it takes us to a new page on case studies, and they're all laid out for you. We've got all of our different case studies by topics and by locations. I can do the same thing for the tools, and I can do the same thing for the guidelines. All there in quick and easy reach. We also have location-based pages. If I want to find out, for instance, in Western Australia, and I want to have a look at Perth, oops, there we go. It will come up and it will provide all the information on the benchmarking of Perth. There's the results there, the transition strategy that we've done, and you've got those same tabs, but this time it's all of the research and the applications and the tools that are relevant to Perth. The other thing I want to quickly show you is our menu over to the side. This one here is another quick way to get to everything you want. In particular, if you want to get to the old CRC's web page, that's here under CRC Legacy. So I can have a look at, say, the original research projects. They're all there. That's the existing, or the old website, I should say. So that website is live. It's just launched last weekend. A lot of work has gone into that, as indeed in the conference itself. We have got 1 or 2 links that are still being corrected and fixed up to make it work, but it's 99% there and it's ready to go. It's a beta version, so if you find any issues with it, just let us know. But we hope that that's an easy way to find all the CRC tools and resources after we're finished. So that's enough about the website. Let's get into the content for today. As I said, what we have coming up is our first webinar, which is looking at the authorising environment and fostering political change. We'll shortly be welcoming onto stage a panel. We have a number of panellists from the webinar who will be joining us here in Melbourne. Others will be joining us via web link. We're going to cut to a short break just so that we can set up the stage with them ready to go, and I think we're almost ready to go. So if there's no further ado, I'll do that, and for the rest of the day you'll be hosted by the chairs of that session and then the final session, which is the closeout. So thank you for that, and we shall see you soon. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Hi and welcome back. Welcome to our final panel session, which is actually our first webinar for our webinar series. I'm just going to introduce, so don't expect too much of me on camera. I'd like to welcome on Rob Skinner, who's our Deputy Chair of the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities. He's also got a wealth of experience in the water sector. So we've also got a number of speakers from around the countryside, including some behind me here in the studio in Melbourne. But I'll let them introduce themselves. So Rob, over to you and good luck. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jamie. And welcome. Well, I'd like to commence by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land of which I'm joining you from today, which is the Wurundjeri people from the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. We have 45 minutes to, with six people eminently qualified to talk about this subject of how do we foster the political change necessary to deliver water-sensitive cities, or how do we get the enabling and authorising environments right? And this does remind me of a challenge that Ken Matthews threw down to us 10 years ago when a group of us went to Canberra to pitch for the CRC, and Ken was on the interviewing panel, selection panel for the CRC. And he said one of the major challenges he sees is how do you convert water-sensitive urban design and water-sensitive city from a cottage industry, as he called it, to an essential and legitimate component of the national water agenda. How do we make water-sensitive cities business as usual? I'm sure the CRC and its partners have made great inroads, but the fact that we've chosen to close this conference with addressing this question indicates that there may still be a little way to go. So the CRC has asked 6 people to discuss this topic, and we propose to break this into 5 segments. Segment 1, or round 1, for 9 minutes will be a presentation from the planners or the implementers of water-sensitive cities or integrated water management. And do it with artificial separation, because the planners are always involved with the policy development process. But we have David Ryan and from SA Water and Adam Lovell, who will spend 3 minutes each talking about what they see as the main challenges and enabling obstacles facing planners and implementers of water-sensitive cities. And we'll ask them what are the two or three big questions still to be challenged, and what are the elephants in the room, if you like. The second round of speakers will be a response from some central policy perspective. Mike Rowe from the WA Department of Environment, Water and Environmental Regulation, Deb Brown from DELP, and Jane Doolan from the Productivity Commission. 5 minutes each to address these issues. The question is, how are state governments and policy setters and regulators and the National Water Initiative addressing these challenges? And we'll then go back to the implementers, David and Adam, to talk about any further reflections, and particularly what about citizens for whom we're all working? How can we resolve input from and local government's role? We'll then have 10 minutes of Q&A, and there is a chat room here, I presume. I haven't checked on that, but we'll like to have some discussion and input from the audience, and then a bit of a roundup. So really very limited time, so I'm not going to say any more at all. I am now going to ask David Ryan to open the batting on behalf of the implementers, and with your reflections, David, on those questions. So what are the challenges? What are perhaps 2 or 3 elephants in the room? Over to you, David.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, and good to be here. I'll kick into it so I'll bring the perspective of a large integrated water utility to the conversation. So I'm the Chief Executive of SA Water. I've been here about 15 months now, but I've been in the water sector about 18 years. So I'm both very focused on what's going on in South Australia, but also bringing those experiences from more broadly across the country. A couple of points around our context, which is actually important when I then start talking around some of the challenges. We serve about 1.7 million people. We provide pretty much from catchment to tap and retail customer services. Within South Australia, stormwater management is looked after by many other organisations, and that's a point I'd like to touch on a little bit later on. Our drinking water resources include surface water, reservoirs, catchments, groundwater resources, seawater desalination, the River Murray. All of those are under enormous pressure. So we've already got quite a lot of diversity in our water sources, but equally we know that they're under incredible pressure, and that's never been more obvious to me than when I've moved to South Australia. And we're already seeing, for instance, regional towns that are relying upon groundwater services that are already, facing things like over allocation and the like. We have a history as an organisation of playing a significant role in terms of building healthy communities, particularly through our recycled water programs. We're one of the largest recycled water programs across the country. And when I think about water sensitive cities, particularly in South Australia, there is a strong base that we're already building from. So many of the councils were early adopters of stormwater harvesting. So councils like Salisbury, Campbelltown, collection of other councils, and largely they've been successful. There have also been some that have had challenges, whether it's from an engineering perspective or a commercial perspective, that have also flavoured some of the conversation as well. Our primary industries here also embrace a whole range of water sources, including recycled water, either SA Water run or private schemes that we provide water to in the very important wine regions of the Barossa and McLaren Vale. And the value of green open space has also been recognised through the use of recycled water by Adelaide City Council, for instance, in the irrigation of Adelaide parklands. And many South Australians also have rainwater tanks as a result of policy and consumer awareness and behaviour. So while there are many great things underway, there are also a whole range of challenges, and they won't be a surprise to you, but I've seen them happening across jurisdictions. Things like roles and accountability just aren't as clear as they need to be, but then equally, where there is clarity, sometimes we're not necessarily comfortable operating across in those fuzzy spaces. Funding mechanisms continue to come up, continue to arise and be a point of tension. But regulatory models have also been, most recently for our organisation, a tension as well, and how we get all of the players working together, policymakers, regulatory bodies, and implementers such as ourselves. And we've also seen within our business there's been a need to call out our role more clearly. So now we're very specific in our strategy that a core responsibility of our organisation is around healthy communities. It's about being involved in the urban planning space and about building broader relationships. Rob, if I was to say what the one issue from our perspective is, and we're seeing play out quite a bit now, is how our regulators, policymakers, and implementers are actually all working together and filling those gaps. Because it's not to take it from a cottage industry to something to a mainstream. It's not lacking intent, but we keep running into obstacles, particularly, say, for instance, in the regulatory space.
Much, David. We'll just have to keep moving. If people do have comments they want to raise or questions, do so in the chat room, please. But we have now been joined by Mariam Heshmet. Mariam, you want to introduce yourself, please, and you address those issues that we're talking about in this first round. Over to you, Mariam. Sorry, Mariam, can you hear? So while we're sorting out that, Adam, would you like to make a response, please, on behalf of the Water Services Association of Australia?
Hello?
Yes, Adam, please go ahead. We're waiting. Mariam can. Yep.
Yep, thanks very much, Rob. And really pleased to be today. Where we see it from a national perspective is there's some huge challenges, but also some really big opportunities coming up, particularly around there's an opening here at the moment that's presented itself that we can influence what urban water services look like over the 20s by shaping what the outcomes are through a new national water initiative. And I think the other advantage of this is throwing up this new ideas around localness and the ideas that we can put forward around generating local solutions and incorporating stormwater into the urban water environment are right there before us. So I think it's about breaking the status quo. That's a hard job. That's a hard job because I think people get comfortable in where they're at, the services they're receiving, but we've got to all advocate for breaking that status quo and really getting behind a new national water initiative. We can put through a discussion about city deals over the past couple of years. So city deals is potentially one way we can actually, in some of those out, put them into on the ground action. The next one would be, let's elevate the debate. And what I've seen is a lot of work over the past 2 years, and the CRC has done some fantastic work as well. But even last week, there was more research published about the improvements in mental and physical health through access to green space, and that's about elevating the debate to have health beyond the 24/7 business of drinking water and wastewater services. Bringing stormwater in and ensuring that physical health, mental health, air quality, urban heat island are all incorporated into the outcomes that we're trying to achieve through urban water services. The final one is, let's embrace the Sustainable Development Goals. There's still potentially just a niche sort of side of what we're doing, but it is so important. It lays out an incredibly broad framework for which urban water services can be delivered not only in Australia but around the world. I'm actually talking to you today from the National Indigenous Australians Agency here in Canberra, and that's part of it too. That's about delivering livable and healthy communities for every Australian. So let's embrace the Sustainable Development Goals as a way forward. Now, I can hear in the background they're still trying to get Mariam online. They're my 3 points to start off with, Rob, but happy to take any comments.
Thanks, Adam. Mariam, are you in a position to make a contribution? I'm in a bit of a trouble. I know we're having... We do have a chance, Mariam, for you to come back in about 10 minutes' time. So we might have to move on, I'm afraid, Mariam, because this is not working for you. Okay. We might then go into the second round, which is sort of a response from the central policy perspective. And Mike, what do you think the challenges are from your perspective in addressing some of these issues that have been raised by David and Adam? Over to you, Mike.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to be involved today. It's an honour really to be part of this conversation and such an important national dialogue. Firstly, I think I'd like to recognise that the diversity that was spoken about in South Australia is similar to what we experience here in Western Australia, or I get the sense that South Australia has a much more diverse range of advanced water sources in terms of the way that they bring water into their urban requirements. WA is a bit behind the scene in that front. Many people would realise that we're a groundwater city here, where 70% of Perth's water supply is provided by groundwater. But that includes water in public open space. When it comes to potable water supplies, of course, our desal story is well known nationally, given that we were fairly adopters in that space. And similarly, we're moving to treated wastewater, or our water corporation is as well. So I think that the response, and also when I'm hearing Adam talking about what he thinks the three big challenges are, I don't think it's around the lack of commitment from government or the lack of awareness of the importance of water-sensitive urban design as part of how we should be thinking into the future. For me, some of the challenges become apparent when we think about the amount of innovation that has to occur for widespread adoption of these sorts of technologies and approaches. With the CRC has done such a great job of sort of articulating the opportunities to get these technologies and innovations adopted. But the challenges are still there, often in a policy setting sense or certainly in a cost sense. So I think we have to accept that a lot of the solutions that we're talking about in a water-wise cities environment although there might be win-win-win from a triple bottom line perspective, the costs may still be difficult to apportion in terms of beneficiaries. And so when we're thinking about wide-scale adoption of different things, then trying to understand how best to do that in a policy sense becomes quite a challenge. I'm talking reasonably selfishly at a jurisdictional scale. Obviously, it's great that the Productivity Commission has come out and recognised the importance of this conversation as part of a potential renewal of the National Water Initiative. So it's great to see that conversation elevated. But for me, there are still challenges there about how we reconcile some of the increased costs associated with these innovations and technologies. And up until now, a lot of the cost has been borne by governments, whether they be local, state or Commonwealth, providing one-off kind of funding injections to get these kind of innovations adopted. I don't think in the long term that's sustainable, and so maybe there needs to be a collective effort towards understanding the long-term benefits of these sorts of innovations from a benefit cost perspective, to really be able to demonstrate that it's actually in everybody's best interest to invest a little bit more upfront to make sure that we get long-term returns, whether that be through reduced ebb and heat island effect or sustainable green spaces over time, perhaps watered with alternative sources in our case, away from the potable solution that might be available at a cost kind of competitive basis, but in the long term we're going to be needing to be relying on multiple sources of water. So for me, the CRC's done a magnificent job of kind of illustrating what might be possible, of pointing out what mainstreaming should look like. In Western Australia, we've got a Waterwise Perth Action Plan which sets out what the future might look like for us, and that would be a rolling plan. But there's still so many questions in my mind about how do we really get the economics of this stuff well understood, such that the costs can be appropriately apportioned upfront when we come to urban planning decisions or making new investment choices about the rollout of different technologies over time.
Okay, thanks so much, Mike. Deb, do you want to give your perspective from your work that's been going on at DELP in Victoria?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think you've already heard it in the conversations or the presentations to date that to progress into a water-sensitive city, there actually is no one solution. And as a policymaker, you have to look at all the levers you can pull and the benefits that can be achieved through that. And I think from a Victorian perspective, I'd quickly run through a couple of those opportunities and the work that we are doing. I think it hasn't quite come out yet, but the importance of community awareness continues to be a real challenge, that while the Millennium Drought got communities really interested in water and the challenges particularly that drought provide, I'm not so sure that the community as a whole knows the challenge that is faced from a long-term point of view from a water supply, or from being able to treat and manage the byproducts of urbanisation like stormwater and wastewater. So in Victoria, we know that by about 2065, the amount of shortfall we'll have between supply and demand is the same volume that we use today as a population, and that's an extraordinary challenge to consider, and a 2065 timeframe is really hard, but in practice, it's something like 50 gigs of water being added to the Melbourne system every 5 years, and that's a real challenge, and that's not even considering the impact of how you better manage stormwater and wastewater. So I think we need to continue to test with the community their understanding of the challenges and get us the social licence to really think about the other levers that we need to pull. Within that, I think I spoke to some of the data available, and that again gives us some of those opportunities around innovation that we've heard as well, because a lot of industries that could potentially use sources of stormwater and recycled water don't necessarily know what's available to them. And I think as public policy makers, we need to provide data and information so the private sector can have a really important role in seeing us transform the amount of water that we use within the landscape. Collaboration is a really big challenge. I think Dave spoke about the challenges in South Australia. In the Victorian context, our integrated water management program involves over 100 organisations that all have a role and an interest in water. So that tells you that it is not an easy solution where one organisation has the opportunity to really solve the problem alone, and we need to work together. And we have, through the last 3 years, created the Integrated Water Management Forums, which has been about bringing those partners together to find the common challenges and common solutions. And collaboration, while a great term, is actually 3 years on, we've seen the value that practice has given us. And then again, that challenge around looking at the regulatory and the pricing settings. You've got to go back and look at all of those and really challenge some of the assumptions around regulation, but also price and the role government has to play in that. So there is lots that we are trying to look at in a Victorian context, and it is all of those, and it's the challenge of putting all of those pieces of the puzzle together to get the right outcome. And I guess our experience is at the moment that a step forward is great, and you're not going to find a perfect solution, but progress and taking the lessons from the last 20 years where industry has tried to make these advancements is really important. But you do have to take it one win at a time when you're looking at such a complex settings and when you're trying to change things like land use planning contexts in an environment where you do need to think about affordability and impact on the community. So I guess for Victorians context, it is looking at all of those potential policy levers that you can pull and either discrediting some of them at a point in time or looking at those where you do have the opportunity to advance them because you've got the social licence or the regulatory setting to move forward. So Rob, pretty quick spin around the policy work that we've been doing.
Steph, thank you very much indeed. And of course, we all know, Jane, that the Productivity Commission has done a substantial amount of work in this. Do you want to provide your perspective from the National Water Initiative and the things that need to be done to progress, as Adam said, at this high level?
Yeah, and thanks so much for the opportunity. Productivity Commission has a bit of a luxury here because we can basically sit back and look without actually having to deal with any of the issues that the previous speakers are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And I think it starts, so we could start even conceptually, and we started by really saying what needs to shift? You know, what is current business as usual? What does it need to shift to? And I think, as Adam said, the key thing is integrating stormwater into the consideration of and management of water supply and wastewater management, but to look at the outcomes, not just the provision of safe and secure water supplies and drinking water and minimising impact on the environment, but then adding a couple, what proactively can be done to improve the environment and the whole new area of urban amenity, water in the landscape, green open space. So you're changing actually what you want out of water management by adding in stormwater and adding some substantial but not well-defined outcomes. So then we went and had a look at, okay, if we look at the policy, the regulatory, the service delivery, the whole system, how does that gear to enable those additional functions and outcomes to be delivered? And we found many barriers and impediments, but we found 10 big ones. And of those, the 5 massive ones are, from my perspective, firstly, there aren't any clear objectives for urban amenity. People want to see it, but we don't know how much, what quality, and as part of that, how much does either government, community want to spend on it? What is it worth to them? The second one then is, even if you knew that, whose role is it, which I think David referred to? Whose job is it? What's the job of the water utility versus the planning authority versus local government? And it's made easier if you do have a clear idea of what you're after. I think the other thing is that it is an area where 2 massive sectors have to learn to talk to each other. And that's the planning sector and the water management sector, who have been separate, if not forever, since European settlement, at least in Melbourne since the 1950s. And they work in different spatial scales, they work in different time scales, they have completely different terminologies. They actually have to learn to work in ways that, as they're both making really significant decisions, they're taking account of each other. And we generally don't see good frameworks for that. We do in Western Australia, Mike. There is a framework there. I know it has its problems, but the framework's quite a good one for how water management and land use planning talk to each other. And then finally, we have even if there are, solutions, everybody agrees to them, we do have some policy barriers and mandates and restrictions. So for me, those are the big key areas. There's others and there's new, but in particular, it's the authorising environment by providing a bit more government direction around the areas of urban amenity and therefore the outcomes to be achieved. Now, that was a piece of work that we did. It's always easier to identify barriers than it is to find solutions. But we've taken that work and put it into our recommendations that we hope will be considered in the development of a new National Water Initiative. And that is that there needs to be a new objective around this. There needs to be a whole new focus on service provision in a new NWI. It'll be as important as water resource management in the future that we have. There needs to be an objective around integrated urban water management. It needs to reflect customer preferences. And then we've gone into the sorts of planning and the issues. Again, easy for us. We make recommendations. People like Mike and Deb have to decide what they're going to do about it. I think it's, though, the advantage... states have to sign on to a National Water Initiative. It's nothing magical in itself. What it is an agreement between all jurisdictions to pursue certain policy directions. But the power of it is, if you have that agreement, you have all states agreeing it's important, agreeing to pursue those objectives over time, agreeing to be held accountable for their commitments, and then you have the independent objective assessment that happens regularly. So you've got a fair governance framework that, if you like, influences the longevity and the ongoing commitment to the agreement. So from our perspective, we identified some work. We've actually tried then to go, this is important enough to put in a new NWI, and made those it's our draft recommendations, I have to say. We're still after consultation. But those sorts of things into consideration of new National Water Initiative.
Thanks very much, Jane. We really have now heard from the implementers and the concerns and some of the frustrations they have. We've heard from the policymakers and the strategists. I have to say there's no inconsistencies. It appears to me that the concerns for the implementers are being heard by the policy makers. And I'd like to, we've only got 40 minutes left, but I'd like to have a bit of a discussion around, and perhaps start with the implementers, David and Adam, and welcome Mariam. Mariam, we haven't heard before, just arrived from the City of Gold Coast. I'd like a bit of response from Adam and David and Mariam as to what you've heard and whether you're reassured that things are being done in the right way and the right pace, I suppose, given that you have heard that the policy makers understand your concerns. I'll start with David, then Adam, and then Mariam. You can perhaps introduce yourself, if we haven't heard from you, and also comment on those. So we only got 12 minutes left, so I guess 2 or 3 minutes of high-level response before we open up. David.
Thanks, Rob. I'm always impatient, Rob. So things are never happening quickly enough, and that's not just in policy. That's just full stop. But I should also say, I thought Jane made the point that we can always throw up lots of barriers, but we actually can do stuff around and in sometimes even in spite of some of those barriers as well. And there is lots of great work going on. I thought that point that I just did want to touch on, that point that Jane made around the planning sector and the water management sector, coming from interstate and then moving to South Australia. I'm seeing the same thing happen here, and I'm sure it's the same in other states. And I actually think it's a really big issue. And even though it is a barrier, we can make changes even within our organisation in terms of the capability we have, to get to understand the planning process better, the language we use, the timing we use, all that sort of stuff. We can actually make change there as well. So yes, there are barriers, but there's more that we can do. I think the issues are well understood. There's lots of people working at them. And it's about making sure we've got the right people working on the right issues. So just to very quickly mention, Deb talked about the work that's gone on in Victoria, and what I saw work really well was in the forums that were held there. The implementers got on and implemented a whole range of things, but those big strategic issues got taken out of the implementers' hands and put into more the policy, the regulation space. And I think that worked really well, having the right people working on the right problems.
Thanks very much, David. Now, Mariam, I think we've now got you. Can you hear us at this stage? And we're interested in hearing your view, particularly your perspective from local government or the local government-oriented organisation. Are you in a position to talk to that, please?
Having difficulty.
Yes. Do you want to say a few words now, or do you think it's just too complicated technically for you?
I did not.
I'm sorry, we really can't hear. Yeah, technical issues, I'm afraid. Thank you, Mariam, for persevering with us. We may have to ask Adam, though, would you like to respond to those issues being raised? In the context of David's impatient, I suspect you are too, but impatience is part of this problem.
Hugely impatient too. Yeah, I mean, we're a Congo line of impatient people, I think. I'm in Canberra today. I've met with Minister Pitt. I've met with the opposition because I want them to be able to support at a national level a go forward. Water has to be part of Australia's livable communities. Be you in Sydney, be you in Alice Springs, or be you in the Kimberley somewhere, we've got to have water as part of that, and we've got to have our political leaders signing on to it. As I said to them, look, we're not a headache for you because, in most parts of the country, thankfully, you can turn on a tap and you can drink safe drinking water, and we'll return the waste services safely back to the environment. But that's the status quo. That's the here and now. The future, we all know, is different. And it also goes to Australia's competitiveness as far as I'm concerned. When immigration opens back up and growth really opens back up, when we're trying to attract the best and the brightest here to Australia, I've seen some work that Sydney Water have done, and people, a good percentage of people identify our clean waterways and our livable communities as the major attraction to come to Australia. But we've got to continue on that path. We see growth in many parts of our cities has been skyrocketing without water at the table. And the other misconception, well, the other problem that I've seen that we've had is that there's been great pronouncements about tree canopy, about green space, but the disconnect comes: how do you keep those green spaces green? How do you actually plant the trees and keep them green? And that's where the disconnect comes in with local council. Look, wrapping that all up, I can't argue enough more strongly for an NWI, a renewed NWI, modern NWI with healthy, livable communities as the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, that has federal, state, local government, water utilities, and every other collaborator we can bring on board to deliver that. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Thanks very much. We are getting a lot of consensus about what has to be done and how, but we still have an issue with accountability and timing for getting these accountabilities sorted out. And one of the issues that we have is a lot of our work in terms of livability, urban amenity, is in the realm of local government. And it's a great shame we haven't been able to hear from Mariam today, who's very close to that scene. But I might ask Deb and Mike to ask you about two things. One is this issue of the pace in which we can sort out this clarification of roles, because until we do that and sort out accountability, we're not going to take those next steps. It won't be business as usual unless people actually understand and it's agreed what their roles are. But in answering that, Mike and Deb, you also think about local government in that role, because local government is a major player. Perhaps, Mike, do you want to respond to that two-part question?
I'm optimistic, despite what I said earlier about the challenges in terms of cost attribution and other things like that, that at least for WA, that we've got a great chance to get this right. We've got a great amount of collaboration across the state government agencies to try and deliver the Waterwise Perth Action Plan. We've got an excellent network of really committed stakeholders in the water sensitive cities transition network. So try to imagine Perth into the future with a whole bunch of stakeholders around the table. There's now very good awareness in the planning system of the importance of water sensitive urban design being hardwired into future planning decisions. So it feels to me like the fundamentals are there in terms of what the kind of the setup. The challenge is, of course, much of our urban form is already hard baked. So we're living with decades of previous decisions, not all of them terrific. And so whenever we find a retrofitting opportunity going forward in terms of urban regeneration, we need to grasp that with two hands and make sure on a case-by-case basis that those are truly demonstrative of best practice, and then making sure that the planning system, to pick up on the points that have been raised earlier, really do give sufficient attention to water sensitive urban design. The state has a big role to play, particularly in a post-COVID environment where so much of state and Commonwealth expenditure will be built on infrastructure, and that provides an excellent opportunity to try and really mainstream best practice for water sensitive urban design in large-scale urban renewal or precinct level or the rollout of infrastructure or whatever it might be. So the roles and responsibilities piece I'm less concerned about. In WA at least, I think that's reasonably clear. Local governments do have an enormous role to play, and we do see some really great examples of local governments that are grappling seriously with this issue and wanting to do the right thing. And in the end, collaboration's been a very strong standout word for me from this conversation, because it is genuinely going to take a whole of community effort to want this to happen and to send the right signals to all of our political masters and to get the effort and the priority it deserves. It's going to take effort from all three tiers of government, and local government are fundamental to actually making the rubber hit the road in the context of state and other planning decisions. So we're not there yet. We've got some good foundations. I'm really excited about the collaborative environment that exists in WA. Looking forward to seeing how and when the National Water Initiative might land in terms of that new focus that Jane talks about. And I think a lot of the effort that we've all been doing over the past 9 years or so has really been augmented very effectively by the CRC for water sensitive cities. So I'm very grateful that that institution existed and for the good work that they've contributed to this dialogue going forward.
Absolutely. That's the time to finish, I think. That's a very high note, but I won't finish there exactly. Deb, do you want to respond to that? Sorry, Mike. The role of local government, you didn't touch on that. Are you going to have any reflections on that? Mike,
well, just to say that they're vital, because at least in the WA context, that's where a lot of the planning decisions and choices are made. But the reason I'm optimistic about that is because one of our roles as an agency is to provide advice to local governments about, say, water management plans at various scales in the planning cycle. And they're they give good effect to that sort of advice, even if they don't have the capacity themselves to do it. So I'm pretty confident that local governments understand the importance and the opportunity. We do struggle a bit with the timing of some developments that may have been approved, say, a decade ago, and they may only come to fruition in right now. And often, particularly in Perth, we're challenged with development occurring in not ideal places. They're either low in the landscape and subject to inundation, or high in the landscape with no available groundwater. So there's no easy areas left to develop in Perth, and that means that development is pretty hard to get good water-wise outcomes when the upfront planning hasn't been done well a decade ago. And that's some of the legacy challenges we're facing right now. And a lot of that comes down to good intersection with local government, but particularly with the development industry, to be aware and alive to the fact that they too have responsibilities to try and make good water-wise choices, and particularly when it comes to designing precincts. Local governments are critical. They're part of the conversation already. For the most part, they do engage very effectively. Developers are essential to get in the room. Many of them are showing positive signs in that way as well. But we've all still got a long way to go. So a great first 9 years of effort, and it's up to all of us now to try and mainstream that practice going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Deb, you will have the last word, Deb.
Thanks, Rob. I couldn't agree more with the comments made to date. And I guess my reflection is you've got to take the opportunities where they come. And Jane spoke to it. We know that amenity is critical, and the last 12 months have taught us the importance that public open spaces and local waterways play with the community. And we have to own that and grab that and use it to our advantage in how we influence future land use planning or how we look at those retrospective opportunities. And it is pretty daunting when you look at it, as Jane said, at that interface between water and planning. But the approach I think we can take is look at those place-based opportunities that can demonstrate the value and in either the context of a greenfield or a retrofit, and show where water and planning can come together. And that, I think, is the approach we're taking, in part in Victoria, through things like the work we've recently done through the Yarra Protection Act, or even in our work more recently around protection of waterways of the West, where we have tried to bring the value of waterway management, water planning and land use planning together. And it's not statewide and it is place-based and those sorts of things, but it is showing the value and the worth. And equally, we're developing in areas that are dry and don't have great sources of water, and the impact of stormwater and wastewater will be really detrimental on our receiving waterways if we don't get it right. But that's an opportunity, because we know communities want cities and suburbs that they want to live in, and I think it's fair to say that water plays a critical role, and we've got to take this window of community expectation around public open space and green and cool environments and run with it and put our kind of worth on the table when we're talking about future growth for the states.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you very much indeed. We're really almost out of time, but I'd like to thank all the speakers in alphabetical order, Adam, David, Deb, Jane and Mike. I think to answer Ken's challenge, the works that happened in the last 10 years with CRC's had a critical input to, has meant that water-sensitive cities has gone from a cottage industry to a critical industry. That's been recognised. What we have to do now is to make sure that we build on that work. As Mike so well said, we have to build on the work, the legacy of the CRC, to make sure that the critical industry becomes actually an industry that's driving those outcomes that Jane talked about. For their contribution. And Jamie, back to you, back to head office, back to the studio.
Perfect. Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much. All right, that brings us to the conclusion of our program, and I'll pick up where you left off, Rob, about the legacy. Hopefully people over the last couple of days have got a legacy from being involved in the conference, from the case studies and the site tours to the State Day, where we talked around the countryside about what best practice looks like, and then starting to bring it together again at a national scale with some of the CRC tools and research, and now just talking about the authorising environment and where to next. A couple of quick thank yous. Big thank you to the technical crew here in Melbourne that have been pulling all this sort of work together. We did the big reveal yesterday, and hopefully you can see the complexity that's involved. We also have a number of people around Australia who've been working in the hubs, in the state-based hubs, to make it all work. I should particularly mention Sydney Water and SA Water for providing the venues where we hosted those sort of events. A huge thank you there. We couldn't have done it without you. And of course to the participants. It wouldn't have been a conference without having people come along, contribute as speakers, as hosts, or in the sessions, whether they're in person or online. So that pretty much brings us to an end of the program. We have one final session now, which is going to be a conclusion with Cheryl Battergold, our chair, joined with a few other luminaries from the CRC who will bring the whole thing to a head. So what we're going to do is close and go to a short break now while we set up the stage, and then we'll return with that closing session. So thank you again, and that's all from me. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cheryl Battergold, and I am Chair of the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians, the First Peoples of country on which we all meet today across Australia. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, as well as their emerging leaders and any other leaders or elders who may be joining us today. So it was back in 2011 that I took a phone call from my former water minister in Victoria. I was in London, about to leave my hotel on holiday, and Professor John Thwaites was the executive chair of the Monash Sustainable Development Institute. And he asked me if I would be prepared to chair a proposed CRC into water sensitive cities. I was in a hurry. I wanted to go sightseeing, and I was also aware of the other bids in that particular CRC round. And I thought, frankly, another water CRC, I don't really think it's going to get up, but we need it, and it needs to be focused on urban water, and this was really my space. So notwithstanding the fact that I thought it wouldn't get up, I said yes, because I could then go out on holidays. Little did I know that I was committing to 9 years, the past 9 years. And so it was. On the 1st of July 2012, the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities formally began operating. Tony Wong, Rebecca Brown and Anna Dalatek were the intellect behind the organisation, the IP behind the organisation. Tony Wong worked with energy, passion and a small team to develop the original research plan that was to become the pitch to the Commonwealth. The team locked in over 70 partners that committed to the 9-year program of research and, importantly, impact delivery. In total, the Commonwealth committed $30 million and our partners committed a whopping $89 million. Our partners were from government, non-government, water utilities, institutions, research and tertiary institutions, private and the private sector. So our vision was sustainable, resilient and livable water sensitive cities. And our mission was to drive research, synthesise that research and influence in the market in that order. And from the beginning, we knew we would not be successful after 9 years unless there were works on the ground that reflected that original research plan. It also had to clearly reflect the vision that we had for water sensitive cities. So what have we achieved? We've answered the big questions. How does water contribute to livability? How do we plan at different scales for resilient water systems? How do we collaborate, importantly, to achieve success? How do we engage the communities in which we work? Because without them, we can't deliver. And we have delivered the big projects. Research is done, adoption has been delivered. We've built communities of practice within cities and across the world. We have developed new skills. Many individuals have forged new businesses, in fact, and new careers in water-sensitive cities. Many have done research and they have gone on to become practitioners in water-sensitive cities. We have influenced livability on many levels across many cities across the world. And we have changed the language. The new language of water-sensitive cities is built into city strategies, cities that we haven't even worked with. It has become part of the lexicon. We've built a succession plan. The original cohort of CRC water-sensitive city leaders have taken a step back after nurturing the next generation, and already that generation is nurturing the next. And we are regularly told that Australian cities lead the world in sustainable water practice. And this is because of the collaborative and sustained efforts by so many facilitated through the CRC. But a CRC, by its design, does not live forever. It needs to have an end, and that end is now. We should take a moment to think about what is next, and it shouldn't be more of the same. It should be new research, new practice, breaching new barriers and reaching new frontiers. But we have given birth to the next generation. Water-sensitive cities will continue this work and more within Monash University's Sustainable Development Institute. And later on in this session, I'll introduce you to Tony Capon, the Executive Director, into whose hands we give our child. What's next? The CRC will continue until the 30th of June, at which point we close. The conference webinars will continue and will ramp up activities to plan for the next phase of mainstreaming. The board and exec will work to close out the remaining governance, finances and logistics of the CRC, and we will be reporting in a transparent manner, of course back to the Commonwealth, but to all of you, to our many partners. I have many people to thank. Initially, of course, for the Commonwealth Government, for this program, the CRC program, which I think is an incredibly innovative program, and to our long-standing and loyal industry partners who've not just contributed funding, but reached in to assist us and have taken our research and applied it with resulting impact. I have to thank our 70 participants, but especially our 8 essential participants: University of Queensland, University of Western Australia, Monash University, Melbourne Water, South East Water, the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning in Victoria, the Department of Communities, Housing in Western Australia, the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation in Western Australia. Your funding was important. It is your engagement, though, with the research, your long-standing commitment to the CRC, serving on our committees, supporting our workshops and conferences, your willingness to participate in adopting that research as your own. For it is that. It is yours. I can never thank every single participant, large or small, enough for that. I'd like to thank also my wonderful board members, in particular my Deputy Rob Skinner. However, every one of my board members have given it their all, and we have a fine governance team, and I thank them so very much. I thank the CRC's executive and the many who came from universities and industry partners to lead and participate in our organisation. The CRC's many staff members across many cities, adoption, operations, communication, research programs. I'd like to thank our 2 Chief Research Officers, initially Jörg Keller and more lately Bryony Rogers. Without them, the research that has been done would not have been as such a high quality as it is. And finally, my 2 CEOs, past and present. I thank Ben Famage for committing to the CRC. I must admit, though, I think Rob Skinner and I twisted his arm to do it, but he came across. Ben has delivered all we have asked and more. He has grown in the role, and his expertise is demonstrated through his leadership of the organisation, our people and our partners. He is a fine leader, and I'm so very proud to have worked with him. And finally to Tony Wong, who I regard as our founder. I'm not actually sure that Tony thought he needed a chair, let alone me, but he got me, and we've journeyed this 9 years together. Tony is an extraordinary individual, and it has been a privilege to work together in the CRC. His intellect, his sheer ability to tackle the absolutely impossible, his passion for water-sensitive cities was just so very infectious that has driven many to become advocates for the subject. I have learned so much from Tony, and I'm so very grateful to his contribution to the CRC, but more really the fact that he has fulfilled the vision and mission. In doing that, he has earned the respect of all of us. And I'd now like to call on Tony to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl, for those kind words, and thank you for the invitation to speak and say a few words. Hello, everyone. When Ben presented his overview of the CRC over the last 9 years yesterday, it was really with real pleasure to in fact see a very brief summary of all the achievements that we have made. Now, if I can have the first slide, please. This is just the repeat of the slide that was presented. But what I realized from listening to that presentation and seeing the slide is how much we have been so enrolled in our mission that often we don't stop to smell the roses. We don't stop to reflect on what we have achieved. And we have achieved amazing things. So it took me all of yesterday to really think about it, and I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to do some personal reflection and thank a few people, important people that have been in this journey with me all this while. All these achievements are really the achievements of many. And I really do like to reflect on how we started and acknowledge those people that actually came together and create this vision of a water-sensitive city CRC. If I have the next slide. Yep. And this is the slide that Ben showed as well, and I really just want to home in on a few things, like the BID team. The BID team you see before you, in fact, was established in November 2010. It was a warm summer day when we came together and basically said, hey, it's time we did something that is bold, that has vision, and have a crack. And we came together, Professor Rebecca Brown, Professor Anna Delatich from Monash, with myself, Professor Jigwa Yuan, Jörg Keller, and Barry Ball from the University of Queensland, Professor Anas Gadwani, Professor Richard Weller, and of course Kathia, that basically did a lot of the administrative work. Each one of them are visionaries in their own right. They are a champion and a deep expert in their field, and for us to come together and construct what would be the vision of a CRC for water sensitivity was, as I remember it, a really fun time. It was a lot of work, it was a lot of advocacy, but it was a really fun time. I do want to acknowledge them. Many of them have in fact moved on to greater and better things. I'm probably not hearing this, but if you do see them, if you could pass on the message of my deep appreciation for their work with us in creating the CRC. Professor Brown, of course, is now the Senior Provost at Monash University. Professor Delatich is the Executive Director of Engineering, Executive Dean of Engineering at UTS. Professor Jigwa Yuan have picked up Order of Australia along the way and is leading a center in UQ. Jörg Keller, whom I contacted just today, is kayaking in some river somewhere, having a great time. Barry Ball is one that I really want to acknowledge because he actually stayed with us on both sides, on the board as well, on the BID team, the board, and then with the executive team. Anas Gwadwani found new fame, as you would know. If you follow Twitter, you would know Anas. But the passion keeps going from that work. Richard Weller, professor at the University of Pennsylvania, the top design university in the world. And all of that, in fact, contributed to what the CRC is about. And I deeply, deeply want to acknowledge their significant contribution, their boldness, but their spirit of goodwill and generosity. When we commence our executive team, the first response I get, I think, from the board and others is, why do we need such a big executive team? And I really do want to acknowledge that we started with a great ambition of concurrently commencing 31 research projects all at the same time. And that require, across, I think, 12 disciplines, that require significant commitment and coordination, and all of the bid team came across to the executive, plus more. And I'd like to acknowledge Robin McLaughlin, who was our Chief Operating Officer, that did a tremendous amount of work in getting the contracts sorted. We had to sign 80 contracts with 80 different organizations. And of course, in Program 4, which was all about facilitating research adoption, the inaugural executive team was made up of Ken McIntosh from Perth, and of course, Jamie Hewitt, who now is on our executive team, continue to be on our executive team. I'd really like to acknowledge all of them for setting really the foundation for what we have achieved to this point. There are a lot of people that I should mention, and if I did try and do that, I will find that I will in fact miss a few. So I'm just going to stick to the structure that we have here. We have our inaugural board, and it started as a board that really was there to ensure that the CRC was set up well, the governance structure, the issues of check and balance, and the processes. Cheryl, of course, was the chair, one that which I would like to make a comment on perhaps later on in the next few minutes. But we do have, again, the powerhouse of people that know how to put a board together, know how to do this integration of research and translation of that research to industry. I'd really like to thank the inaugural board, Sean Cox, then with Melbourne Water, Greg Davis, then with the Department of Water in WA, Barry Ball, and of course, Rob Skinner. We also have the inaugural Essential Participants Reference Group. Apologies for calling the R wrong, it's reference group. And I'd like to thank Sarah Harbage, who chaired that inaugural group, together with Ian Johnson from Southeast Water, Peter Morrison, Melbourne Water, Antonietta Torrey, that stayed with us right through and still with us. Thank you, Antonietta. John Saville stayed with us and now chairs the EPRG. Greg Davis from the University of WA, Ian Harris, many of whom have now retired, Pauline Nestor, who have retired, and Julie McLennan. They, of course, provided and completed the picture of what it takes to set up a CRC, to undertake the research, but to be focused on research translation and adoption. Like I said, there are lots of people to thank, and of course, there's so many that is very much part of the family of the CRC. And I do recall, somewhat retrospectively, in a workshop, perhaps a few years after the commencement of CRC, where we basically say, what are our values? What do we want to really strengthen and highlight? And we came up with 3 key issues. We always wanted to be bold, but at the same time, we want to ensure that we act with integrity and that we maintain the generosity of spirit. And it was through those key values that drove our work, drove our mission, and has got us to where it is today, where I believe it still remains that is the core values that we bring with us in completing this mission and moving on to the next. Finally, I'd like to thank Cheryl. Cheryl has been a wonderful chair. I have, before being the CEO of the CRC, I've never been a CEO. I've been the boss before in a small business whereby, what the boss says goes. And it was a huge learning curve for me to try and create an environment of collaboration across multiple organizations, 80 of them, while at the same time maintaining the mission, the sense of mission that we had in undertaking the work. To ensure that the integrity of the 31 research projects that we commenced simultaneously was going to deliver the products, and by and large, we did that. Throughout all that, there were always ups and downs. I do remember it to be a really fun time, but I do also remember that there were many tensions. And I remember an advice given to me by one of my mentors, Professor Russell Main, who was the director of the CRC for catchment hydrology. And he said, if all your partners are happy, you are not working hard enough and you are compromising on your mission. He said, try and keep it to 10%. And he said, hopefully it won't be the same 10% throughout the 9 years. And I've always carried that with me whenever I find that, that there are tensions, and there have been. But throughout all of that, we were able to iron them out. We were able to deliver on the research program. And for that, I thank Cheryl that provided the advice and perhaps the reassurance that I really needed to stick to the course, stick to the mission, and to ensure excellence in research and to be able to translate that into innovation in practice. And I hope, and on reflection of all the achievements that Ben said yesterday, that we were able to achieve that. So Cheryl, you've been a wonderful chair in that you did allow me to work within quite a broad envelope to enable me to maintain creativity and adaptivity in the way we undertook research. But more importantly, when there were tensions and when partners were ringing you to complain about your CEO, you often gave me the assurance to, yes, pull your head in, but at the same time, that you believe in the mission that we are on. And that gave me great reassurance to press on. Thank you very much for that. So I wish you all well. One of the things that I'm very delighted about is that a couple of years back, we commenced our transition. It's a succession planning work whereby you now have new leaders, you now have a new executive team, you have the likes of Ben, and you have the likes of Jamie, that is going to carry us into the next phase of our journey, the mainstreaming, the upscaling of the knowledge that we have created. From a research perspective, the person that's going to lead all of that, of course, is Bryony, who has also come up the rank in the CRC, being a research fellow in Tranche 1, but really led the development of Tranche 2, working in partnership with then Chief Research Officer Yerk Keller. I should also mention that throughout these 9 years of CRC, we have gone through 4, actually, Chief Research Fellows. So, you know, it's obviously a busy job. And I'd like to acknowledge them, Chikwa Yuen, Rebecca Brown, Yerk Keller, and I'd like to invite Bryony now to come and say a few words.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Cheryl. It is my great pleasure, but also with some sadness, that I formally bring our CRC for Water Sensitive Cities research program to a close. It has been an incredible journey of learning, of collaboration, of innovation, and of excitement as we set out new frontiers. We started our research journey with around the country workshops with industry, starting to understand what are those research needs, those research questions that are going to lay the foundations for the revolutionary way forward for water-sensitive cities. It was a nucleus of professors that led the development of the research framework, and Tony's mentioned a few of them. Tony Wong himself, Rebecca Brown, Anna Deletich, Yerk Keller, Chikwa Yuan, also Daryl Lloyd Chow, Nigel Tapper, Anas Godwani, David Pennell, and there were more. It was that through their leadership that we laid the disciplinary foundations that proved the concept of the key building blocks for water-sensitive cities across economics, society, technology, urban design. We had 34 projects and hundreds of researchers involved, and this included, over the life of the CRC, 49 PhDs who are now working in research and practice as our next generation of thought leaders in water and city planning. Through our first tranche, we forged new and strengthened old relationships with industry and with researchers. And these collaborations laid the foundations for our even stronger Tranche 2 program in terms of the integration of those disciplines. We had 5 integrated research projects and a project specifically about the tools, bringing together the evidence and the insights and the practical guidance into tools that can be used beyond the life of the CRC. It was an opportunity for new research leaders to emerge, as both Tony and Cheryl have spoken about. I want to acknowledge Syed Iftikhar, Steve Kenway, Chris Chesterfield, Nigel Bertram, Christian Urich and Caroline Oldham for their leadership of our Tranche 2 program. And particularly want to acknowledge Professor Jörg Keller for his support of our research leaders in the second tranche. He trusted us to drive this second wave of activity and gave us all the support we needed to help really bring that to fruition. Through Tranche 2, we had our views firmly set on the legacy of the CRC. What are the set of tools that are going to be needed to help industry continue to mainstream water-sensitive practice over the long term? And we created a real coherence across those programs to be able to provide that comprehensive guidance to help cities move from vision through to planning through to implementation. I'm so excited to see the knowledge platform really bring that together and help this knowledge and these tools be readily available and accessible beyond this conference and into the future. I also want to acknowledge the effort and the commitment that both the research teams and the industry teams had to focusing on adoption in this second tranche of the program. Each side had to really step into a grey space in between, go further than what traditional research roles or traditional industry roles would normally do to be able to forge that fruitful path forward and really see rapid uptake of the knowledge and evidence and tools. A few thank yous. To all the project leaders across both Tranche 1 and Tranche 2, your leadership and your commitment to collaboration and to interdisciplinary research has been profound. You've nurtured your postdocs, research assistants, and the support staff in each of the programs to bring together an incredibly productive 9 years. I thank all the people that have been involved in the various industry steering groups and committees, as well as the user testing groups, as we've had more of a tool focus in the last few years. Again, that commitment to really working closely, hand in hand with the research teams, has been just what we've needed to see the success of the mission. Thank you to the executive teams of the CRC as they've evolved, particularly to Tony and to Ben. Your support and leadership of the research program and the CRC program as a whole has really set the framework for groundbreaking new research and innovation to occur. And to the board, thank you also, and particularly to Cheryl, your support of the research program and your commitment to the boldness that has really underpinned the program has been really special, and I thank you. One of the things I'm most proud of when I think back over the CRC is realising just what's possible when you bring together vision and strategy and a collaborative culture and embed that in a truly transdisciplinary environment where you've got industry and research and even community working hand in hand towards a common goal. I think what we've developed over the last 9 years is a model for how this kind of work can happen for all kinds of complex problems that are facing society. And it's through this type of collaborative approach that we can truly drive the system transformations that are needed for us to create sustainable and livable and resilient cities more generally. But the job is not done. The conversations in the last few days have really highlighted that there's still questions, whether that's about how to get things on the ground. What do we do to truly mainstream what we know is possible and what we know is necessary? We have serious alignment around the agenda of the Transformative Cities agenda that we co-developed over the last few years. And to me, that sets a clear vision for where we need to head next. How do we think beyond water and start to realise the potential of truly integrated city planning? And what we've done in water in terms of the innovation in the last 9 years really sets a path forward for integrated city planning and city shaping to follow. And I'm really excited to see where that agenda will continue over the next years. So while this CRC is ending, the ideas won't stop, the collaboration won't stop, and the change won't stop. And I'm really excited to be continuing on that journey with you all. We are now handing to John Savelle in WA, our chair of the Essential Participants Reference Group. John.
Thanks, Bryony. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm pleased to be here to be able to speak on behalf of the Essential Participants Reference Group. Even though we are spread all across Australia at the moment, it is fantastic that we are celebrating the achievements of the CRC over the past 9 years. I'd like to congratulate everyone that's been involved, the research institutions, the private industry, the government agencies and the small and medium sized enterprises that has progressed the water sensitive issues through the Cooperative Research Centre during this period. The EPRG is proud to have been involved and to have been welcomed into the discussion on the strategic direction of the CRC by both the board and the executive of the CRC. And for that, we are extremely happy to have been a part of this successful CRC. The ability of such a diverse group of people to collaborate with each other to achieve some magnificent results of research and adoption during that 9 years. And through all of this development, the development of a whole new group of water champions within Australia has been a magnificent achievement for us all. Everyone in the CRC needs to be able to stand tall and know that they have been part of one of the most successful CRCs that has had major impacts on revolutionising urban water management strategies in Australia, delivering the social transformations needed to support water-sensitive cities, including community attitudes and changing behavioural change and implementing behavioural change, and also the developing the enduring partnerships between government, research bodies, industry, the water sector, and the community. All of these have been achieved in the last 9 years. I'd like to thank three people in particular for keeping the CRC relevant at the forefront of decision makers, ensuring that funds were always available to conduct additional research and the implementation of that research. I'd like to thank and congratulate Tony Wong for not only his role in pulling together the submission that enabled the funding to be achieved, but for his role in as CEO in getting the project up and running and all of the strategies in place that we have worked towards in this 9 years. So well done, Tony. I'd like to thank Ben Formage. The ability of Ben Formage to keep all participants informed and keep the energy of the executive of the CRC going during the most extraordinary of circumstances that we have endured in the last 12 months has been outstanding. A magnificent effort, Ben. The success of the Water Sensitive Cities Institute is guaranteed while you're there to help guide that program, Ben. I think it's you're created yourself as a fantastic leader of people. Whilst I know I will miss some people out, I do want to signal two others from the executive out, and for their continued professionalism, their continued help that they provided, Bryony Rogers and Jamie Hewitt. You've done a magnificent job over the last 9 years, so thank you too for all of your efforts. Finally, Cheryl Battergold on the board. Cheryl, you have steered this ship so magnificently. Whilst a lot of work was done by everybody, the leadership that was shown by yourself and the wonderful board that surrounded you has ensured that we've all been part of one of the most successful CRCs undertaken in Australia. This success does not just happen. It happens because people at the board level, the executive level, have put in countless hours of work to make that happen. Being self-indulgent for a second, I'd like to thank the EPRG and the hard work that they've put in and the role that they have played. Well done to that diverse group of people going forward. However, notwithstanding the personal thanks I've given out, I'd like to congratulate everyone that's been involved in the CRC, because we've all played a part in making this the success it is. And to finish, it's sad that it's come to an end, but in a way, let's look forward to this only being the starting point of creating water-sensitive cities all across Australia through our continued interest in the Water Sensitive City Institute. So thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for all the work that you've done. It's been a pleasure for myself personally to have worked with you and known you, and you've led a magnificent job. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And we thank you for your work from day one in the EPRG and now leading it. So thank you, John. I'd like to now finish with introducing Tony Capon. Tony is really important to me because he's going to take my 9-year-old baby and to bring that baby to teenagehood and maturity. So please welcome Tony Capon, the Executive Director of the Monash Sustainable Development Institute.
Thanks very much, Cheryl. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be with you all here this afternoon, and a marvellous meeting you've had around the country. A lot to learn from the processes that you've used in the CRC. I'd really like to thank Cheryl and Tony and you all for the remarkable achievements across this 9-year collaborative research enterprise. And I guess speaking from Monash, but also the other universities who have had key roles in the CRC, the University of Queensland, University of Western Australia, all of our partners around the nation. I'm here today to reassure you all that as I received the baby from Cheryl, that we will take good care. We will continue to nurture. We can intend to maintain a focus on water-sensitive cities within the Institute at Monash and more generally across the university. Monash has a proud history of research in this field, perhaps 30 years of work. And the last 9 years have really assured, I think, everybody that this is such an important domain to continue to pursue. We welcome Bryony and Ben to the leadership team at MSDI, and they will continue to press forward with partners around the country, around the region, and indeed around the world. In conclusion, I guess reflecting from MSDI about where we are as an institute, in one sense, the institute has grown up with the Water Sensitive Cities CRC over this decade. There's been a lot of shared learnings between the CRC and MSDI as a whole, and we very much look forward to continuing to collaborate with all of you as partners, as you're able to continue to engage, as we together strive to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So back to you to close out. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tony. And I think CRC is not our baby anymore, it's our young child. And I think our young child is in very safe hands. It does remain for me to just close this meeting and close this conference. I want to say such a sincere thank you to Jamie Hewitt, who has done an extraordinary job. If you thought it was hard to run a conference, it's so hard to do it in the way we've had to do it this year. But I hope you've got lots from it. I'd like to thank you, all of our conference delegates and all of our participants. I'd like to invite my colleagues to come around me as we say goodbye to all of you. I have a little gift for them, and so as I say goodbye, I will hand over those gifts. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you in the next iteration of Water Sensitive Cities.